So today we're going to talk about how to become a court interpreter. Now, please let us know if you are not from Florida or if you are from Florida. That's the first thing I would like to see. Thank you, Solange. I muted my phone to not interrupt. Hello, everyone. Yes, okay. I'm going to focus on Florida, but if somebody is not from Florida, I'm going to go into more general instructions for how to become a court interpreter in other states. Always, of course, you have to check with your state court administrator to see specifically what are the challenges to become a court interpreter there. But let me first introduce myself. My name is Agustin de la Mora. I'm a federally certified court interpreter for Spanish. I have been a court interpreter for about 30 years. I started my journey in the state of Florida as a freelance interpreter for the 13th Judicial Circuit Court, which is in Tampa, Florida. And from there, I started learning a little bit about how to become an interpreter, and I became federally certified in the 90s. And I've been doing interpretation for a long time. I have participated in many, many trials for civil and criminal proceedings. I have worked anywhere from traffic violations to murder cases. I've had the opportunity to participate in some very high-profile drug cases. And when I was practicing, I realized that there was something missing. How did I become an interpreter is the crux. A lot of people ask me, well, how did you become a court interpreter? And the truth is, it was almost by accident, because I was actually a teacher, a language teacher, and I see somebody's from Texas. So I will talk to several of you about Texas in general, but of course you're going to have to talk about Texas and to call the Department of Licensing in Texas. But if you send us an email, we'll be happy to point you in the right direction as to who is the certification body in the state of Texas. So I became an interpreter because I was a language teacher. I was teaching Spanish in Berlitz, and one of my students was an attorney who wanted to have an interpreter for a deposition. And because he didn't know anybody else, and because I was his teacher, he basically asked my boss if I could be his interpreter during a deposition. And that was very interesting to me because I didn't even know what deposition was, but I liked it. I got hooked, as they say. And I went to the courts and I offered my services as an interpreter, but I really didn't know much about what to do about an interpreter. I just thought it was cool, and it paid more money than I was making as a teacher. And so I went and I asked, and the person who was in charge of the interpreters at that time in Tampa, Florida, and this was about 30 years ago, asked me a few questions and asked me if I had any experience. I told him that I was an experienced teacher and that I had done a deposition the day before. And funny enough, that was enough to get hired. So I got hired in 1987 maybe, as a court interpreter for the 13th Judicial Circuit Court as a freelancer. And as a freelancer, I found out that the first time I went to court, there was a lot of things I didn't know. I didn't know how to address the judge. I didn't know where to stand. I didn't know what to do. And at that time, I thought, well, all I have to do is go to the yellow pages and look for a school for interpreters. And to my surprise, I found none. Then I looked for resources for court interpreters, and again, I found none. There was very little information about how to become an interpreter. There was very little information as to what were the ins and outs. But I was lucky because the people at the 13th Judicial Circuit Court were my colleagues who were very interested in learning about court interpretation themselves. And they had started a study group, and we would sit down together and do our best to understand what the process was. We bought a book. I will never forget, we bought a book called Fundamentals of Court Interpretation, and we would sit down and read from it and try to understand it. And then we found out that there was a certification program in New Jersey. So we went to our boss, and our boss talked to the people of New Jersey, and they authorized them to use their exam so we could be tested as interpreters in the state of Florida using the New Jersey exam. And that was my introduction to an interpreter job. But I really liked it. I found it fascinating. I loved the challenge of the linguistics of it, the vocabulary. But I also found out that I needed a lot of information and that I needed to find a way to do it. So I found out that there was an association called the National Association of Judicial Interpreters and Translators. And that's where I first got a lot more information as to what are the ins and outs. I found out for the first time that there was a code of ethics. So it was a little difficult to come about information as to how to become a court interpreter. Now it's different. Now we have a lot of access. Every state in the nation has a language access coordinator. And those language access coordinators become to something called the Council for Language Access in the Courts, which is a national association that resides in the National Center for State Courts. And their mission is to help all states create language access plans for the courts in every state. So now things have changed radically. First of all, we have the internet. We have a lot of information. Each one of the states has a way to be informed as to how to become a court interpreter in that state and what are the requirements, both financial and otherwise. So now there's a lot of information, and now there's a big push. It's important for us interpreters to know that there are at least some federal laws, for instance, the Court Interpreters Act of 1978 and the Civil Rights Act of 1968, in that 64, I'm sorry, where the right to an interpreter is asserted once and again. The Department of Justice is now requiring that all states have a specific language access plan for their courts. So there's a big push for now professionalizing what before was considered something that, oh, anybody who's bilingual, we just call them and they can do it. It's not a big deal. So that was how I got introduced. And now in the state of Florida, for instance, to get certified as a court interpreter, there is a process. Most states follow this model, so that's the model that I'm going to talk about. Once you get certified in the state of Florida or in any other state, it's because you follow the steps required to do so. In the state of Florida, there's a 3-step process. First, you have to attend a 2-day orientation. It's a lab orientation where interpreters are introduced to the ins and outs of interpretation. What is the code of ethics? In which court proceedings are court interpreters needed in the state of Florida? And what is the basic structure of the judicial system in the state of Florida? What are the places where you're going to be serving as an interpreter? And basic information about the 3 modes of interpretation: consecutive, side, and simultaneous. Once you take that orientation, your next step is to take a written examination. The written examination is in English. It's a multiple choice exam, and all candidates must pass that certification part, which is the written exam, with an 80% minimum score. Now, that written exam is a requisite in every state that has certification, each one of them. So no matter which state you're in, if you are going to become certified, you are at one point going to have to take this written exam. In what part of the process you take it, that's what differs a little bit. Some states do that as the first step. Some steps, for instance, right now, the state of Texas, as far as I know, doesn't have an orientation program per se. So people can go take the written examination without that step of the orientation. Once you have taken the written exam and passed it with an 80%, the next step is, of course, to pass the oral examination. And the oral examination is an exam that is offered by most states in the country at this point, in which interpreters are confronted with the 3 modes of interpretation and with a case-based exam. In other words, all of the exams that the interpreters have taken to become certified in any of the states are based on real court proceedings. And you will be tested in side translation, consecutive interpretation, and simultaneous interpretation. It's language specific, different from the written exam that is only in English. That means that when you're hearing, you're going to be given a site translation document in English, and you're going to have to site translate that into your language of expertise. This exam is recorded, and the recordings of your test will be sent to be rated. In order to pass this portion of the certification, you have to attain a 70% minimum in all 3 parts of the test. The consecutive portion, you're going to hear questions in English, you will interpret that into your language of expertise, and then you're going to hear the answers in that language of expertise, and you're going to interpret them into English. And the final part of the test, you're going to hear somebody speaking in English, and you're going to be asked to simultaneously interpret into your language of expertise. In the state of Florida, once you have passed these 3 steps, your last step, of course, is to send your application to the state of Florida to get your background check cleared. And once you have cleared that, you will become a certified interpreter in the state of Florida. Once you're a certified interpreter in the state of Florida, then you will have to, for every 2 years, present your documentation for continuing education credits so you can keep your certification. Most states have a similar process. I can tell you that all states for sure subscribe to the idea of having a written exam and an oral examination for sure, and most of them require an orientation of some kind and continuing education credits to keep your certification. So what do interpreters do in court? Well, we interpret in all kinds of cases. Again, depending on the state you live in, sometimes you will be more focused on criminal cases, but in many times you will also be asked to interpret in civil cases. So you will hear from eviction notices to divorces to child custody to DUIs, traffic violations, and even murder trials. So to be an interpreter, there's certain qualities that you must possess. First one, of course, you have to be able to interpret accurately for individuals with high levels of education and large vocabularies. And you have to be able to transfer whatever language you're speaking with the same accuracy and the level of sophistication of their vocabulary, so it sounds exactly the same in the other language. Of course, you also must be able to interpret for individuals with limited language skills, which means their grammar is not that good, they use a lot of slang, they use regionalisms, they might even use a lot of idiomatic expressions, and you have to be able to transfer that into the other language with the same level of expertise and the same level of accuracy. You also have, therefore, to have very good public speaking and interpersonal communication skills. Why? Well, because when you're in a trial, you are literally on display in the public eye. When the person is answering from the witness stand and you are interpreting into English what they're saying in another language, everybody has to be able to hear you, has to be projected so the whole courtroom can be aware of the answer from the witness, and you have to have very good communication skills so you can preserve accuracy. One of the things that I've asked many times, and it does happen, is sometimes you do hear in court some pretty traumatic or shocking testimony. You, as an interpreter, have to be able to handle that situation professionally. You can't get personally involved. So as you're probably starting to see, being a court interpreter is a lot more than just being bilingual. And you have to be studious. One of the things, and we're going to talk about this in a second, is the fact that the biggest misconception about court interpretation in this country has been, in my 30 years of experience, has been on the part of the end users, meaning attorneys, judges, probation officers, and police, and defense attorneys, has always been the idea that an interpreter is simply a bilingual person, that there's no other requirement. But what we know now is to become a certified court interpreter, a competent interpreter, a person has to have all these qualities that I mentioned before, which means you have to have a high level of sophistication in 2 languages and be able to transfer the language back and forth. The only way we know to do that for a bilingual person is to actually study to become a court interpreter, to become a skilled court interpreter. So people ask me, well, I mean, do you like it? Yes, I love it. I actually have a degree in psychology, and when I came to this country, I thought I was going to be a psychologist. But once I got involved in court interpretation, I discovered that I really found it very interesting, very satisfying, and very challenging. And because I like a challenging career, I opted to stay there. It's a good career because of the constant growth. I love linguistics. I love languages. I'm sure many of you do, and that's why you're here. I love communication. And that alone for me was enough. But it's also, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, is a growing field. There's a projected growth of 29% for interpreters and translators. I don't think there's many other professions right now where they can, we can talk about that sustained rate of growth for 10 years. So it's a good place to be in. Most people, if you ask them, they really don't know much about court interpretation or interpretation in general. But interpretation and translation businesses in this country last year grossed over $1 billion. So it is a huge industry, and it is, if you like doing it, it's a good career, it's solid, it's going to last for years and years. The urban areas will continue to provide many jobs because of continued globalization. Businesses will bring forward interesting opportunities because now we're not only doing business with our next door neighbor, we're doing business sometimes with countries on the other side of the world. I have a friend of mine that is now doing business with people in China, and he never in a million years thought that that was going to be a possibility. He's an engineer, and he's doing engineering projects with China, and he now has 2 full-time Chinese translators working in his company because it is an essential part of his business. For a lot of people, being a court interpreter, it gives you a lot of flexibility. Many of our colleagues work on video remote interpreting, so they don't have to go anywhere. They can be at home. They can choose their schedule. Many of us like the idea of being freelancers, so you don't have to be tied from 8 to 5. I will confess, I worked for the government for 10 years. I was a chief interpreter for the Ninth Judicial Circuit Court here in Florida. And I liked it very much, and it was a challenge for me because we didn't have a program and we had to start a program from scratch. But I will tell you that I'm a little bit more of a free spirit, and it was difficult for me to have this idea of I work every day from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, no matter what. Now, that was the main reason why I decided to become a freelancer again, because I like making my own schedule. If I have an opportunity, like I had a few weeks ago, to go to St. Croix to do a trial over there, I can. And I was in St. Croix for 2 weeks doing a federal trial. And it was very interesting. I got the opportunity to see 9 of my colleagues that I hadn't seen in a long time. And that flexibility I love. If I want to go on vacation, I don't have to ask my boss. And I think that the only bad thing is, like a friend of mine has told me more than once, is the only bad thing about being your own boss is that you cannot call in sick, because if you do, you know you're lying. But other than that, I love the flexibility of being a court interpreter. The income across the board in the United States, the starting salary is about $44,000. We are fighting very hard to improve that, and I think we're moving in the right direction. I strongly believe that the main reason we're going to be successful is because the more we prove that we're professionals, that our jobs are essential to the courts, that the salaries will go up. Federally certified interpreters, and their average pay is over $70,000. And if you are a freelancer interpreter, then interpreters can make anywhere from $40 an hour to as much as $200 an hour. It depends on where you live and your language of expertise. But that is changing rapidly too. Now most attorneys that hire interpreters are recognizing that if you want a certified interpreter, you're going to have to pay upwards of $50 to $70 an hour with certain minimum requirements, which has been dramatically changed from when I started, where it was almost like a favor. Many of my interpreter colleagues were working basically almost for free or as volunteers or as part of their job in a law firm. But now most judicial systems recognize especially certified interpreters as professionals who need to be paid appropriately. Now, this certification process that I mentioned, is this hard? Well, I tell you what, the passing average for the first-time takers nationwide is less than 20%. But why is that? The important thing is not why is it less than 20%, but why is it so low? Here's the answer. Most interpreters in this country are not trained as interpreters. Most of us start just like I did. I was a teacher, and because I was a teacher, I was hired as an interpreter, and I liked it, and I stayed with it. But the truth of the matter is, when we started testing interpreters, we realized that without education, it's very difficult to do a professional job. So the low passing rates only tell us one thing. Not that the exams are difficult or unfair, but that most of us, when we face the examination, we are not prepared. I was in California recently doing a training for a group of colleagues that speak Farsi, and they were talking about the fact that in other professions, the passing rate is much higher. 60%, 70%, the Bar Association, for somebody mentioned the Bar Association passing the bar as attorneys. And yeah, that sounds like if my exam has a 60% passing rate versus an interpreter's exam that has a 20% passing rate, that obviously there might be something wrong with the exam. But what I reminded my colleagues is this: attorneys, before they take the bar, they go to school, they have a college degree first, and then they specialize in the law, and they have a 2.5-year program in law school. So they go to law school for 2.5 years before they face the examination. Many of the interpreters across the nation face this challenge of passing a very complicated, a solid, rigorous exam to become court interpreters with zero or very little training. So I want you to understand, if we want to become court interpreters, if we want to be certified, the key is education, training. And that is what we're offering you today. I have been an interpreter for many years, but I have dedicated most of my life to become a training expert. And I've been training interpreters for 30 years. Why? Because I realized this is what was missing. This is the missing piece. If you want to go from being bilingual to being a court interpreter, there is no magical pill. There is no 5-minute cure. You have to study. You have to be educated. I started as an education because I wanted to solve this problem. I don't want our passing rate to be less than 20%. I would like most people to pass their exam on their first try. And because of that, we want to give you the best quality education possible. We have developed a whole system. We call it the De La MORA Signature Program. It's taken me 30 years of being involved in the business of teaching hundreds of people on how to become court interpreters. And I have discovered what is the best method, what is the best system to follow to assure a successful transition from being a bilingual person to a court interpreter. Today, I want to introduce you to that signature court interpreter program, because we believe that we have unlocked a successful program that if you follow it systematically, consistently, you will improve your performance as an interpreter, your ability to interpret in a court of law, and your possibilities of passing these oral examinations. We have the first option that we want to offer you is a signature court interpreter program live, online. For the first time, we're going to offer now a 40-hour training program with an instructor. It's a 5-month-long program. It starts August the 2nd and 7th, and is for Spanish-speaking interpreters. We have found that training live sounds like a good idea, but it's costly. People have to go to different locations to find the training, and most training that is offered at this point is offered in 2-day, 3-day seminars. What we found out is that we need more time. We need time to assimilate what we have been learning. We need time for our students to do their homeworks, to find what is needed for them to improve their performance. They have to have time to do their homework and then present it to the instructor. And that's why I developed this program that is a 5-month program. The class is divided in 4 modules. It's called Weightlifting for Court Interpreters, where we introduce you to what I have been talking about, our signature trademark program on how to go from bilingual to court interpreter, step by step, teaching you first what is the core of our teaching system. What do we call it? Why do we call it weightlifting? And why do we believe that it is the best program out there in order to transfer your skills of bilingualism and your idea of helping and communicating into the skills required to be a court interpreter. Then you're going to have 3 more modules, 1 for each one of the modes of interpretation. So you have a side translation module, a consecutive, and a simultaneous module. Each module has 6 classes total, and each one of them is an hour and a half. So think about the amount of time that you're going to be spending with an experienced trainer and instructor. All modules are taught by federally certified instructors, myself included, but each one of our instructors has been trained by us, follows our system, and has proven to be a nationally recognized trainer of interpreters. If you look up their names, you will know that they're around the country considered some of the best experts in the field. When you enroll in this program, you also have automatic access to our study at your own pace English written prep. This is very important. A lot of people fail the first step of this certification process because they don't pass the written exam, because it's difficult to even understand what it's about and what to expect. If you're enrolled in our live program, you also get free access to the program, so you know exactly how to prepare for the English written exam, and you will actually have a test at the end, which is a mock exam with the same level of difficulty and the same number of items as the English exam. Because you're live, you have the opportunity to talk to the instructor immediately. You will have feedback directly given to you as to how to improve your performance based on your performance in class and with your homework. We only allow 12 students, so it's a very small group to give the opportunity for the students to interact with the instructor. Our instructors will work with you step by step. They've already been in the trenches, they've already been certified, and they know what is it that you're looking for and will help you get to your goals. What is the cost of this investment? Our full program is $1,250 is the total cost of the program, and you have 2 ways of paying for the program. You can either pay it all in full, and if you do that, it's only $999. Or if you prefer to pay monthly, you have 5 easy payments of $250 each. Either way you choose, you will have access to the full program. One of the advantages of having this live program for our students is not only do you take the class, you listen to your class, you interact with the instructor and the colleagues that you have in that class. If you want to, you can go and review the class later. You have access to the full video, you will have audio, you will be able to see the presentation again, and all the way to a month after you finish your class, you'll be able to review each and all of the classes that you have participated in. So you're actually buying almost 2 seminars, one live and one asynchronous, where you can review at your own pace what you have been learning. During the 5 months program, you will also have access to your instructors via email, so you can ask them questions, interact with them, and make sure that you are moving at the appropriate pace. If you're a speaker of a language other than Spanish, we are preparing live training for our interpreters, but in the meantime, we haven't forgotten about you. We have the same signature court interpreter program, study at your own pace. It's called an asynchronous program. It's the same 40 hours of video lectures and practice. It does have the same 4 modules so that you can listen to, review, do the exercises, and take your training. You log into the course whenever you need it, you pick it up whenever you are ready, and you move at your own pace. Some of our Spanish speakers asked us, well, you know, I would love to take the live classes, but can I take the asynchronous instead? Of course you could. They have, for some people, it has a great advantage of you moving it at your own pace. And if you want, if you have the time to do 2 classes this week, 3 classes next week, so you can skip 1 week, you could do that in the asynchronous program. If you are a non-Spanish speaker, you will get the whole access, and it also comes with a study guide so you can stay on track at your own pace. If you decide to go with that route, the price is only $598, and right now we have a promo code that I didn't know about, but if you use that promo code, you get 100% off. No, I'm sorry, not 100%, $100 off the price. Well, I hope that this was helpful, and now I'm going to open up the floor for questions. Please, you can unmute yourself if you want to ask any questions, or you can send us a chat, and we'll be happy to answer the chat.